Hey everyone, it's Bobby and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing so you'll be updated and alerted on new videos that we upload. And if this isn't your first time and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We appreciate your support. So today we're going to talk about the frequently asked questions of the Registered Disability Savings Plan, the RDSP. Some of these questions that I get quite often, and I'm here to clarify them a little bit more. Let's get started. So one of the most common questions I get asked is, when can I withdraw from the Registered Disability Savings Plan? We previously talked about the proportional repayment rule, or the 10-year rule, and there's still a little bit confusion around that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do a whiteboard, and hopefully that clarifies how this works.
All right, so we are going to talk about when the withdrawal can happen. So assuming that you've been depositing for 15 years and you are considering wanting to withdraw. So the first 5 years, so you can see here 3,500 of grants. This has been vested and it belongs to the beneficiary. However, in the last 10 years, from year 6 to year 15, those 3,500 times 10 is 35,000. Those are subject to repayments of $3 of grants and bonds to every $1 of withdrawal. So if you were to withdraw, let's say $1,000, then 3,000 of this would still have to be repaid, even though you have this amount here that has been vested.
All right, so I hope that makes sense. And if you do have any more questions, put them in the comments below and I'd be happy to answer them. Or if you want to reach out to me, I'd be more than happy to answer the questions privately. Now, another question that I get is, when does the family income go from the parents to the child? And there's some confusion out there, or for whatever reason, people think it's the age of majority or age 18. Now, I want to be very clear on this, and you can find this on the Government of Canada website, is that from the time that the disability tax credit approved, all the way until the child turns 18, the year they turn 18, and all the way until December 31st of that year, the family income is based on the parents' income, just to be clear there. Now, the following year, when the beneficiary turns 19, in that year, the family income is based on the child beneficiary and, if applicable, their spouse. Unlikely a situation where a 19-year-old is married. However, that is the case. So it's important to recognize that when that transition happens, because what I see is that sometimes people are advised that a 16-year-old should have their taxes done, and then there's a sense of urgency to get a filing for potentially a nil file, or you're doing unnecessary work. So you want to actually file the tax return in the year that they turn 17 for the purposes of qualifying for the child when they turn 19, because they look at 2 years previous. And the reason why I want to make that clarification is that if your child turned 18 and you deposited $1,500, thinking that that $1,500 is going to get the maximum $3,500 of grants, and however that $1,500 potentially would only get 1-to-1 based on the parent's higher income, then you'd only get $1,000 of grants. So you're missing out on $2,500, and I'm sure that you'd be kind of upset if that was the case. If you're looking to make a deposit based on the child's family income, wait until the year they turn 19. Another question that I get is, what happens if my child loses the disability tax credit? And in 2019, the Liberal government proposed that if the DTC is no longer approved, that the beneficiary does not have to close the RDSP based solely on losing the DTC. So that's great news. However, they did create a caveat that the proportional repayment rule would still be in effect, and it is modified. So this is the tricky part, is that we talked about the last 10 years of grants and bonds that are deposited into the RDSP forms what we call the assistance holdback amount. So that AHA is set all the way until the beneficiary turns 50. Let's say that you've contributed for the last 10 years, and let's say there's $35,000 in the assistance holdback amount. Now, that amount typically would be reduced over 10 years, and then after 10 years, there would be no penalty. So in this case, where you lose the DTC, they actually freeze that amount. That $35,000 stays level all the way until the beneficiary turns 50. Now, in the year they turn 51, they reduce 1 year of grants and bonds. So 35,000 minus 3,500, 31,500, and then they take off another 3,500. And then by the time the 10th year or age 60, there's no penalty. And then the normal withdrawal rules for the RDSP would apply. So I hope that kind of clarified things, and that gets people excited to still be able to open the RDSP. One of the other questions that I get is, when should I expect to receive the grants and bonds? Now, the matching grants are typically deposited in the month following the last business day of the contribution. So we're in July. If you made a contribution in July, then in all likelihood, the grant would be paid into the RDSP the last business day of August. If you're contributing the last couple days of the month, it might be 2 months, just to do with some timing. For the bonds, if you qualify for carry forward, meaning that there's years past that they're going to deposit, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for the government to figure out what the appropriate amount is. And then at the end of that month, the last business day, they'll make the deposit into your account. So you just wait for the government to do its calculations. So now we're looking at about 2 or 3 months after the RDSP is opened, as long as it's in good order. For the annual deposit of the bond, it is deposited the last business day of February, and the government will do its calculations and deposit it for you. You'll also receive what we call a statement of entitlement, and that's typically sent out end of January, early February, and that lets you know what contribution will give you the max amount of grants for that calendar year. I hope that answers those questions, and now I'm going to segue into another question, is like, what if I don't get my grants and bonds? So one of the most common things is that your application for the RDSP or the application for the grants and bonds, there's information that is missing, incomplete, or inaccurate. If you have a situation like that, just double check with your financial institution, make sure that's in good order. One of the most common things that arises is a name mismatch due to mismatch with the SIN registry. And typically a spouse who gets married and takes their spouse's surname, if you don't update your surname with the SIN registry, there's going to be a mismatch, because the financial institution is going to do an electronic check of the name, date of birth, and the actual social insurance number itself. If any of those things don't match exactly, there'll be an error. So if you think that that's happened, talk to your financial institution. They should receive an error code that tells you how to fix that. And it's as simple as going to a Service Canada office and updating your surname. If you thought that this video was valuable, remember to smash that like button, hit this subscribe button, and let other people know that this information may be invaluable to them. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.